as they coach in big games.
Well, I think
it is never comfortable football.
Can you imagine that style in the SEC? It works for Oregon.
It does.
Well,
and maybe it'll continue to work in the Big Ten.
Hey,
keep that in mind with Kalen DeBoer in just a second.
Yeah.
Here's Dan Lanning. Dan Lanning, joy versus relief after the big win.
What's so hard about football is this game is such an emotional game. It's such an impactful game. And in moments like this where you want to be filled with complete joy, the relief is one of the biggest feelings you feel, right? Because of how hard your guys worked, how bad they wanted it. But it's never about the team that wants it the most. It's never about the team that just has great emotion. It's about the team that executes. So, I'm filled with great excitement. I'm really proud of our guys, but I'm also really excited to figure out what we can go attack and improve, because the team we are today, October 12th, is not going to be the same team we are in December.
Yeah, you really you want to win that game, right? But there's so much more left on the season for both these teams, likely against each other. It's hard to beat a team twice. We may see it hard to beat them 3 times, whatever happens. I want you to listen to Ryan Day and then talk to me about where their mindset should be, because in old school football, back in the olden days, last year, this would have been a pretty big loss for Ohio State. Here's Ryan Day about how bad this one hurts.
When it comes down to offense, defense, stats, all that, what's the number one thing? The number one thing is to win the game, and it didn't happen tonight. But in terms of message with the team, yeah, it's halfway through the season. This one's going to hurt. It does hurt. Should have won the game. Give Oregon credit. They played well, but just too many things that we could have done better in this game that we didn't. And so we've got a lot of football ahead of us, and we got to get those things fixed.
So how do you handle this with your locker room?
Blake in the mybookie.ag chat room says, so does Ryan Day have a big game problem now? And I think the answer is yeah.
Well, that was a 1-point loss. I really felt like Ohio State was going to win the game almost the entire time. I felt like Ohio State was a little bit better. Obviously, playing in Autzen was a lot different.
They got away from the run in the second half.
Yeah, they did.
If I'm going to question anything, that's going to be it.
Travion had a nice game. Quinshon had the touchdown, but you got to give those guys the ball more.
Travion Henderson had 10 carries and 87 yards.
That's right.
He was averaging 8.7 a carry, and he got 10 carries.
And then, Judkins only had 23 yards, but he only had 11 touches. So, I would go to those guys more. But 3 consecutive losses against Michigan. So, and then you've got the Ohio State, the Georgia. Where are the other 2 I'm looking for?
Yeah, they're 1-7 in those games. I would imagine
Alabama 2020.
Alabama 2020.
Yeah, and then one other one. Anyway, they're big games. It was a 1-point loss. I look at the remainder of the schedule. The toughest game is at Penn State in 2 weeks. I think they're much better than Penn State. Penn State was controlled the entire game until USC gave that game away.
20-6 in that game. USC was leading that game, and Penn State came back. Drew Aller had 3 interceptions, but at the end, Drew Aller looked really good because they let him throw it deep.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys, how much sound you had in that game.
Oh, that was the
back
game.
And forth. I had most of it.
Yeah. I get way too much Gary Danielson now.
Yeah, that was the thing that ran me off that game on the sound.
But he did prove this. He brought this up. Tyler Warren, number 44. It was amazing. You got a 6'6" senior tight end. They ran their entire offense through him. 17 grabs, but they were doing trick plays. They were doing everything to 44.
He did. He ran the ball once. He had a snap once. He was the center on one play.
On a play where he caught the ball.
Yeah, and he was an FBS record-setting tight end.
Yeah.
Basically a Hail Mary in regulation that he went up and just high-pointed, and he was the best player on the field Saturday. But I can't believe Lincoln Riley and the play calls and the clock management down the stretch in regulation before the game went to overtime.
Yeah, he took all of his timeouts into overtime.
It was ridiculous. There was no urgency at all.
You only get to use one of them in overtime, by the way, no matter how many you take in there.
I didn't get it. And now 3 consecutive losses, and everything in the middle of October is done. Like, you're out of the Big Ten. You're obviously out of the college football playoff. Just horrific.
Looks like a
Week 7 in the books, college football, and we bring on Fox's Brock Huard right here on Unlock, brought to you by our friends at MyBookie, mybookie.ag. double that initial deposit when you use the code word next round. Very important. Use that code round next word. Football season in full effect. Winning season is here with our friends at mybookie.ag. Alabama survives after being up 14-0. It was 4:38 to go in the half. A lot of weird stuff happened. It was 14-12 at the break, and then it really got interesting at the end of regulation. I don't know how much you got to see. I know you were in Iowa City for Washington and Iowa, but that Alabama game got crazy.
It did. Good afternoon, Lance. Always fun on these Mondays, especially as it just kind of feels like we're just in the heart of it right now, right? Like September came and went. I don't know what it's like down there in Bama. I know dropping my son off early this morning, I was like, oh, walking to the car, like, oh, there's a little chill in the air. Fall has arrived, and it feels like this last weekend of the college football season kind of planted the flag. There's a lot of flag planting.
Tell me, did you have Army, Navy, Illinois, Pittsburgh, Indiana, BYU, Iowa State, and maybe Vanderbilt as of next week after they destroy Ball State? All those teams in the top 25.
Did not. I did not. But I love it, and I know we're going to get in a conversation about it. But no, I did not see. All I saw with the Bama game was me looking at my phone after every quarter, like, "Come on, Bama! For God's sake, run away from these guys so maybe people can watch our game," which at least was close to about halfway through the third quarter before Iowa just imposed their manhood and their will and their want to and just demolished my my beloved purple and gold friends.
Yeah, by the way, everything I said positive about Jed Fish last week, I'm taking back.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, we chatted a little bit in the lead up to that. Had I maybe chatted with you right before kickoff, I would have said to you, whoa, this eye test, Lance, this eye test is going one way. So before kickoff, we get all our work done. We go through our final kind of rehearsal. We look at video. I work my prompter and my clicker and make sure everything's good. And I love to always get down to the field. And especially once October comes, I always get down there. In September, when it's hot and sticky and humid, I'm careful because I start to sweat, and I sweat through my shirt and my suit. Nobody needs to see that for the open. But this time I started to walk down there, and a couple of the Iowa staffers were like, here, let me show you a back way. It's a little easier. And it was awesome. I got right down to the field, and I went through the Iowa tunnel to get on the field. It was great. And I'm like, well, I'll do that on the way back. It'll save me walking through the stands. So I do that, Lance. I walk up the tunnel, and I just caught the team, unfortunately, as they were walking out, single file, one by one, giving a fist pound to a really disabled child in a wheelchair. And man, those dudes walked by me, and I'm like, uh-oh, Washington's in real trouble. Because while Washington's got all these parts that they've tried to bring in from Portland State and Sac State and San Diego State, these are all homegrown. Iowa only had 4 transfers in their entire 2 deep on offense and defense. Like, these are all just grown-ups. 18 starters returned. And after getting humbled in Columbus in that second half, they played their best game. And I'll say this, Lance, they play that game, they're going to win 10 games. They'll be favored in 5. We'll see what Nebraska looks like in the final weekend of the year. I'm going to take probably the grown-ups in Iowa, the fully bloomed culture there, having more depth and more sustainability than still a young program in Nebraska. So I think that Iowa team, I don't know if they get all the way into the playoff, but I do think they've got a great chance to get a double-digit win season for Ferentz once again.
Yeah, and they're kicking themselves after the Iowa State game, up 14 at halftime. And look, Iowa State's a really good team. Watching them walk West Virginia off the field in the second half in Morgantown. It is amazing, though. Iowa not ranked with that schedule. USC not ranked, which we will get to in a little bit. Utah not ranked, which we can get to them as well. But Alabama, real quickly before we move on. So you talked about this going into the Georgia game. We were talking keys, and you were like, I think the coordinators, both Nick Sheridan, the offensive coordinator, Kane Womack, the defensive coordinator, and now you're starting to see an Alabama team that has given up 96 points over the last 10 quarters. And really, I mean, and I guess you could say this for a lot now that we're coming up on an NFL model, 1 or 2 plays here, Alabama could be sitting at 3-3 with 3 consecutive losses.
Yeah, I think here's the reality, too, is that, and we're seeing this a little bit with the Seattle Seahawks, and I love our new format, Lance. We're kind of doing all college the first half hour of the show, and then we kind of tilt to the NFL side in the second half. I'll blend it just a little bit because you're seeing a little bit in Seattle with their scheme with Ryan Grubb's offense, with Mike McDonald trying to implement this defense. And it's like, okay, it's great. There's unknown the first month of the season. You kind of, can take advantage of that. But then once that video gets out, once there's 3 or 4 games, it's always 4 games, right? Most D coordinators, O coordinators want 4 games within, the most recent to kind of attack. And I think what you're seeing is 2 things. I think you're seeing, number one, the opponents kind of getting a feel for Sheridan, kind of getting a feel for Womack, kind of getting a feel for this. And then you're also seeing, I think, your own personnel like, ooh, we're not able to expand. We're not able to do more. I'd like to get to more volume, but our guys aren't ready for that in the first year of this system. Womack's system is not an easy one to learn. It is unique. It's different. They do it by pictures, right? It's Tom Allen's old school, kind of way. And it's not cookie cutter. It's not, okay, here's quarters coverage. Okay, here's 3 deep. Okay, here's 2 deep. Okay, here's match coverage. Here's things that you've done in your past. It is a lot of newness. And I think you're starting to feel both of those components of both A, your opponents being able to attack you, and B, you're not getting to volume. And maybe in some ways you're even trying to simplify to make sure your guys are on the same page in both phases of the game.
You spent a lot of time over the 2 years that Kalen DeBoer was the head coach at Washington. You know his ins and outs, and I'm fearful now. And just hear me out and you give me your take on this. Mm-hmm. That everything is so dissected when you take the Alabama job. There were people that were upset at the T-shirt he was wearing in the loss to Vanderbilt. There were people that were upset that he smiled after the game after beating South Carolina by 2. You go back and dissect this. Look, Nick Saban, there was a point in time when Nick Saban had these great receivers with either Tua, Mac Jones, or Bryce Young, where the game was over in the first quarter. Like Alabama was up 21-28 at halftime. I thought it was really, really boring. Now that we've become Saturday, on any given Saturday, there's a lot of one-possession games. And if you go back the last 2 years for Kalen DeBoer, 12 of his 25 wins were one-possession games. 8 of his 14 were one-possession games. So this is a different style altogether, and the demeanor is obviously much different. So for Alabama fans, it comes across as he's overwhelmed. Maybe he doesn't care. Maybe he's got other priorities that stack in front of football. We don't like winning tight games. And you just wonder if Kalen DeBoer and his family, after a year of this, maybe they go 10-2, get to the college football playoff, don't make any noise there. If he's like, you know what, this ain't worth it. Is that a possibility?
I'd be pretty shocked by that. I think just based on kind of the past track record and the growth mindset and the maturity that he has of just like knowing thyself, right? To me, I almost look at that as a positive. Like, yeah, he knows thyself. He's not going to care about all that outside noise, and whereas maybe a younger coach that could impact, and all of a sudden like, oh, I got to do this and I got to do this and I got to please these people. I think when you've come from where he's come from, right, and starting in all those years that he did at the small college level, I think it just builds a very clear identity that this is what I am. And I know that I went on a little rant with you last week. Like, get ready. This is the new landscape of college football. Who's blowing the doors off who? Like, where are we seeing that? I mean, I think Georgia only beat Mississippi State by 10 points.
Yeah, up 24. Right? I mean, true freshman quarterback in the second half, played as well against that Georgia defense as you can play.
I think Tennessee just barely scraped by a Florida team that everybody thought was just atrocious and terrible.
Yeah, if Graham Mertz doesn't get hurt in that game in the third quarter, if he plays throughout, they probably win that game.
I mean, just tell me. I mean, this is not 10 years ago. This is not where you come on the field and you are so infinitely better than Vanderbilt at every position group, right? In every personnel group. Or you do that in any particular Saturday where you're like that much better because, these other schools, all those ones that you rattled off from Army to Navy to Iowa State to BYU to Illinois to Liberty eventually, like, you know what they've got? They got a bunch of guys that have transferred in that, were maybe really talented players elsewhere that were the second and third stringers at Alabama and Ole Miss and LSU and A&M. And you know what? Didn't get their opportunity, but they can still play, right? There may be, like, to use a baseball analogy, right? They're not single A players. You're not a major league team. Back in the day, 10 years ago, Alabama fans, you're right. Back in the day, you were the major league team. and you were playing like a AA team, a AAA team. Like that's not it anymore. Now you're a major league team and you're playing like a 4A team, right? Guys that are just on the cusp of being major leaguers. They're better than AAA. They're not minor leaguers. And maybe, an injury, maybe the wrong place, maybe an immaturity, maybe an emotional immaturity, maybe, an off the field, whatever it is. But there are other places now and they're flourishing and they're coming to life and you're seeing that, and it has leveled the playing field. It's cannibalized the Big 12, unfortunately for yours truly, and some of the games that we're going to do here over the weeks ahead. But it is, to me, certainly, Lance, week to week, leveled the playing field a whole lot more than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago.
One thing that might be somewhat concerning, Jalen Milroe, hell of a player, but after the Georgia game, Field Yates from ESPN, Mel Kiper were saying he's going to be the number 1 overall guy taken in this draft. And it looks like a little regression with 4 turnovers over the last couple of weeks against Vanderbilt and South Carolina. The one steady you've always had with Kalen DeBoer, not only winning games, but great quarterback play from Jake Haener to Michael Penix Jr. You saw just Milroe blow up the first month of the season, but he looks like he's taken a step or two backwards.
Lance, I don't think he's an elite passer. Like you guys live this and breathe it and see it every second of every day of every month of every year, right? When you watch him, I mean, to your eye, does he throw it like Mac Jones?
No, like
Tua?
His deep ball he throws a deep ball as well as anyone, but the intermediate,
absolutely.
And I don't think that's ever going to change. But you make up for that with the incredible athleticism and the speed and just everything that he can do.
That's right.
But
so that's what his strength is.
You would expect him to take over games with that because he did it against Georgia.
Mm-hmm. And, and some of this, again, you're how many games in the season? 5, 6, 7 weeks into a season. You do have spring ball. You do have camp. But when I look at this, okay, so go through that list of that AP that you're talking about. You know what I see across the board at the top? I see fully bloomed cultures. I see coaches and Coach Sark that's been there 4 years. I see Dan Lanning that's been there 4 years. They have their cycle of recruits, right? They bring in and sprinkle in free agents, but they got enough of their homegrown that they've developed that there's a real culture. Kirby's been there forever. Like go through that list, right? And at the very top, you see a bunch of fully bloomed cultures. And then interspersed in, oh, guess what? Oh, golly, that's right. Kalani Sitake's been there 7, 8 years, right? He knows Matt Campbell's been there a decade, right? You just see this. And, the one little outlier in all of that is Alabama. It is coach sitting there 9 months into the job. Yesterday was 9 months on the job for Jed Fish. So it's a little more than that for Kalen, right? 9 months and a week, 9 months and 2 weeks. Honestly, look at that top 10. I may be wrong. I may be missing somebody. And you could say, no, Brock, actually there's X, Y, and Z. I don't think I am. I think there's a lot of really fully mature cultures, and throw in Army, right? Throw in even, an Illinois, Brett Bielema, that's not year 1 or year 2 or year 3, right? I mean, they've had time on task to develop their culture, to develop their people, to sprinkle in their free agents. And Kalen is, in year 1 of this thing, and not even a year. He's 9 months and a couple weeks. So there is going to be, I think, a few of these bumps in the road.
It is Unlocked with Fox's Brock Huard, brought to you by our friends at MyBookie, mybookie.ag. Very important. Use that code next round. They're going to double your initial deposit. That simple. They will double it at mybookie.ag. Another thing that jumped out, Shane Beamer, said on the broadcast, hey, look, we didn't come here to lose. We thought we were going to win this game. And you wonder going into these games now against Alabama, teams were beaten in the past. And this will be my last point on Alabama. But when you start to look at the schedule, outside of Mercer, they go to Tennessee this week. They've got Missouri. They go to LSU, to Oklahoma, and then they close it out with Auburn. Those are all losable games now because we are to this model in college football where everybody plays with everybody, it seems. But there was something about that script A and that brand that when they would roll out, it seemed like teams were already defeated, like Tyson back in 88 and 89, and you just don't see that right now.
Yeah, I mean, you would still get through those years everybody's best shot. I mean, I did some of those Alabama games at Arkansas and different places, and you were going to get their absolute best punch, and then they were going to realize pretty quickly, like, dang, I'm a middleweight and this is a heavyweight and I can't compete, to your point. And then it's almost a kind of a psychological beatdown, both physically and mentally. Now that is not the case. Now those teams know, like, hey man, they're vulnerable here, right? They got some areas in lack of depth here, right? They lost some people here. And yeah, they're pretty human. And LSU's got spots where they're human. And Missouri's shown spots they're human. And all those teams you just rattled off. I mean, Tennessee the last couple weeks, goodness gracious, in the month of September, I'm listening to Urban Meyer, and I don't know where Joel fell on this, but certainly the Big Noon crew is like, oh my gosh, the most underrated team's Tennessee, and Tennessee's a national title contender, and Tennessee may be the best team in the country, and Tennessee this and Tennessee that. And then Tennessee the last couple of weeks has looked unbelievably mortal and very human. And I think it's great for the sport, man. I think 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we could have basically, you, me, Jim, and written it down, Ryan, down our final four teams and been like 75% right every season.
You're right.
There's Clemson, there's Bama, there's these teams that are Ohio State.
It was way too top heavy, no doubt. It was what you see in women's college basketball. It was very, and I agree with you, it was very predictable. I don't think certain fan bases want to get used to this, because I think Alabama fans were extremely spoiled, and I still think they've got a hell of a coach in DeBoer. But, one of these coaches like Ole Miss now with 2 losses, and I'm not necessarily, before the game, I said, this is probably an elimination game. After watching how the week played out, there's probably going to be not 1 but 2, maybe 3 teams with 3 losses that ultimately get at-large bids. But if I'm an Ole Miss fan, not only do you lose to an inferior Kentucky, but now I've lost to an LSU team where I didn't relinquish the lead until we lost the game. And watching that game, they should have been up 24 points in the first quarter.
Yep, and you're wondering about all those millions of dollars that you spent. I mean, that's the other component, Lance, and I don't know how much you guys talk about this, but I'm sure that also is where some of this frustration for the fans comes out. I know it was Dion like a month ago saying, hey, take it easy, but you're not taking it easy because now they're pros, right? It used to be, I get mad at these kids, but I'm not going to crush them like I am the pro guys because they're not getting paid. They're still amateurs. Well, now they're getting paid. And now you've got fan bases, Tennessee and Ole Miss, and many of these that have like thrown in their money, Miami, Oklahoma, right? Whose alums and donors have put in like significant money into these collectives thinking what? It's kind of like these parents at these freaking private schools that I see that think they're entitled to something because they're paying for private school. So I should be entitled to that. No, you're not. Money doesn't guarantee anything. These collectives don't guarantee anything. And in fact, Army and Navy and Illinois, and I go through the list, Boise State and Iowa State, whose collectives are far smaller, right? They're competing like a small market baseball team, like the Detroit Tigers just got done competing and pushing. Like money, just throwing money at it doesn't solve anything. But I do think for these fan bases, it gives them more or fans a flame of frustration. And I should have this, and we should be better, and we're giving, and we're got these collectives, and I'm Ohio State, and we just have a $20 million. You told us if we have a $20 million endowment and collective, we're not going to lose these games to top 10 teams anymore. Money doesn't promise you anything, and if anything, it just can infuriate emotionally those fan bases that much more.
Well, that's why I'm so fired up if I'm an Ole Miss fan. I go back to the offseason, media days, and I said it. It's either college football or disaster for Ole Miss. Because you look at coming off
football playoff, you mean?
College football playoff, yeah.
Yep.
They're coming off 11 wins last year, the best in school history. You had maybe the most favorable schedule in all of the SEC. At this time, you thought they would be 6-0 going into that LSU game, and that was the first time they were going to be tested. They already had a loss. Now you got 2 losses midway through October. In both of those losses, you were the better team. And I said in the offseason, the only thing that can get in Ole Miss's way is Lane Kiffin. They're still undisciplined. They're tough to watch because not only have they lost 2 or 3, but in those 3 games, they've had 29 different incidents where guys are laid out stopping the tempo of the game. I don't know how you police that. There's not a lot you can do if a player says that, he's injured on a play or hurt on a play. What are you supposed to do? But, to me, that makes it more obnoxious. If I'm an Ole Miss fan, we're losing these games as well.
Yep. Yeah, well, you tell me, Lance, over the years, how many teams have been bought by free agency and just excelled at the pro? I mean, because that's, what we're looking at right now in college football. Right? This is kind of the first couple years of how do I really want to build this team and build this culture? And how many dream teams have gone on to win Super Bowls? How many of them are just, flush with free agents, and we're going to build this thing through free agency versus building this thing first and foremost by drafting and developing. This is the NFL level, right? Drafting and developing, and then we will bring the free agent in. It might be a quarterback, right? It might be a receiver. We were going to fill in a few of these spots where we're a little bit thin. But I mean, that's been a tried and true method for I don't know how many decades in the NFL that had free agency. Well, now you got free agency in college. And once again, go through the list. Texas, have they done it through all free agency, or have they drafted and developed and built their own? I would contend it's been the high school route for 4 years of getting the right guys and getting all these 4- and 5-star guys at the line of scrimmage. And then, yes, bring in the free agent receiver the last couple of years and bring in the free agent, DB. But by and large, it has been the high school developmental route. Ohio State, Penn State, Georgia, Oregon, go look at it. Go look at, how many are they bringing in 15, 20, 25 and counting on them is like, we're going to build the foundation on free agents, or are we going to do it kind of the high school development route and then sprinkle in the free agent money where we need to? I think kind of college football is giving you a pretty good gauge, much like the NFL has for 30 years, that it's typically the draft and develop route that goes on and wins with a level of sustainability.
There were 4 or 5 games coming into the season, to the regular season, where you were like, these are the marquee games that everybody wants to see. And one of those was Alabama-Georgia. It lived up to the hype. And this past weekend in Austin, Oregon and Ohio State, man, that lived up to it. That's 2 really, really good teams. Somebody said earlier today, if you played it 10 times, they probably split 5-5. Ryan Day, the narrative coming out of that is he can't win the big game. He's 1-7 now against top 5 teams. But that was a hell of a game. Either one of those teams can win a national championship, obviously. What was your biggest takeaway from Oregon knocking off Ohio State this past weekend?
Yeah, the scene was just purely electric, right? And you heard from a bunch of Ohio State fans. We got a guy at our station back in Seattle. His son is the tight end, G. Scott Jr., and G. Scott Sr. was there. It was like, man, it was electric. And even these Ohio State fans that have been in big environments and playoff games and in the cathedrals in the Big Ten were like, man, that only had 60,000. It was the biggest crowd in the history of Autzen, right? It wasn't 100, it wasn't 110, it was 60. But I'm telling you, Lance, if you get a chance at some point, you got to go out there, especially in September and October when the leaves are turning and the sun is out in the blue sky. Like it is awesome. So it completely lived up to the hype. I think we talked last week, either on or off the air. Like, to me, it's going to come down to which quarterback can you trust in the big moment. Because it's not like Will has played 4 years in these big, huge moments. He's won games at K-State and did some really nice things, but I'm talking the weight of the world, the weight of the Ohio State fan base, which is the only fan base outside of the SEC that is an SEC. Like, you feel it, you breathe it, you live it. And I think ultimately in the end, Dylan outplayed him in the biggest moments, made some of the biggest throws with his arm, made some tremendous plays with his feet. And Dylan played just that much better than Will. And I thought that too was one of the big keys.
Only a few of these teams are going to be able to host games once we get to the college football playoff. The one thing I would say about Ohio State, it showed me they can travel and still win in a hostile environment. I'm very interested to see Oregon. I mean, a test will be obviously Big House coming up early November against Michigan, maybe at Wisconsin. They look much improved this past weekend against Rutgers, but I am interested to see if Dylan Gabriel and the Ducks will travel well. Penn State, that was one of the challenges this past weekend was Penn State going to the Pacific time zone for the first time in the regular season in 15 years, and USC controlled the game. Penn State converted 2 massive 4th downs. The final possession in regulation for Lincoln Riley was a disaster, 5 total plays. And USC now, they've lost 8 of 13. They have had a touchdown-plus lead in the 3 games they've lost this year, 3 consecutive games. They were 2-11 on 3rd downs. And Penn State turned it over 3 times, and they still couldn't get the win. If I'm a USC fan, really, really frustrated at this point.
Oh, I don't think there's any question. If you're a Penn State fan, this is why you went out and got the OC you got. Colton Nicky is, if you were to ask our crew, Benetti especially, who's a really smart and curious guy, and said, hey, in your years of doing this, who have been your favorite coordinators to sit with? Who do you think is just at a different level of both curiosity and execution? I think Jason would tell you that Colton Nicky out of Kansas with Lance Leipold through all those years I think you're missing him. You know, when you look at Kansas, yeah, they lost their whole O-line, but they lost the guy that was dialing it up offensively and putting them in unbelievable positions every single week. And when they were down a couple touchdowns at halftime, Lance, I was watching that at the airport bar sports bar before my flight. Like, okay, Colton Nicky, here you go. I mean, this is why they brought you in. This is why you got paid the big bucks. Can you be different than the coordinators that preceded you for James Franklin? And he's run through a lot of them, and I don't think he's always the easiest on them. And his adjustments in the second half, starting with a play that I have never seen in the history of football.
Haven't either.
Right, with the tide. Oh, my gosh.
But you know what, Brock, that whole – and this is what's crazy. Like, where has Tyler Warren been? You know, he had his career high was 8 receptions week 2 against Bowling Green, but that kind of got flushed. Yep. It was, 3, 4, 5 receptions here and there. The entire offense ran through number 44. I mean, 17 grabs, that is insane, but they were doing all types of plays with Tyler Warren.
I want to say the last time that happened might have been the tight end for Utah, who is now a Buffalo Bill, Dalton Kincaid, I believe the name, against USC a couple years ago in Salt Lake City in a game I called where, honestly, I think he had 17 receptions as well. And I'm sure, again, Colton Nicky looks at this stuff, new scheme, new coordinator, new everything. But this is an area we can pick on. They got undersized safeties. This guy's a freak. I'm going to really unlock him, and I'm going to keep going to him. And I'm not going to think that they're going to double him and stop him until they do. And I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. And it's what the great coordinators do, man. And he has been a huge difference maker for him. We talk about head coaches. We talk about quarterbacks. We talk about a lot of, skill position and receivers, even more than we talk about the guys calling the plays. But Lance, I'll tell you, Colton Nicky, it's just one of the great ones. And I thought that showed up in massive ways in the Coliseum.
Well, it makes a lot of sense because people were like, Lance Leipold, he stayed too long at Kansas, should have gotten out. But now when you really start to look at that loss with the offensive coordinator, it makes a lot of sense.
Yep. I think Gus calls him the Big Zamboni, by the way, which is a great nickname.
I got to say this. Colorado, I thought they were going to be trash this year. And they had opportunities. They were down 14 in the second half, but when you have the attrition of losing maybe the best player in all of college football in Travis Hunter, and Jimmy Horn Jr. is out, and you're still able to have an opportunity to take the lead late in the fourth quarter and to win that game and possibly go to 5-1, and they probably would be around 15th nationally right now. Kansas State won the game. I didn't think Avery Johnson was very good, but I got to give Deion credit. If those receivers don't get hurt, I think they probably win that game.
Yeah, I do too. And I don't normally have a real rooting interest in Colorado unless we have their game the following week, which we do down in Arizona. And I was thinking the same thing you were, like, come on, find a way to be 5-1, find a way to be ranked, find a way once again for all the eyeballs to find you. And they still will, right? Because now people are wondering, okay, is this the Deion in Colorado of last year that started fast and totally folded with injuries? Because, well, again, you're a free agent team and you brought all these guys in from everywhere. And then once you have some attrition and once you have some injury, the wheels totally come off. So there will be still a ton of people watching come Saturday in Tucson in a huge game for both of them, because Arizona is at a real crossroads at 3-3, and this thing could go totally south. And for Deion, like, this is a game to me. Okay, we are different. We look different, to your point. We're playing different. We're way more solid. We're way more physical than we've been, but we got to take that next step. And Saturday will be a big one because, gosh darn it, they just couldn't quite finish the deal in Boulder.
Can you get the story behind Fafita's rat tail when you guys sit down?
I will.
Yeah, please.
I will absolutely.
I will watch the broadcast just to hear about the rat tail, because much like in Coming to America, when they just snipped it off and threw it over the shoulder, I think after Fafita's performance this past week, and as soon as I say this, it's going to be like some, in memory of some family member or something, is why he's growing out the rat tail.
Yeah, don't be a dick. Come on.
But I'll tell you this, BYU, the scheme they had for Fafita, because he's small and he doesn't have the quickness of a Kyler Murray or a Bryce Young, you actually pressure him head on, there ain't much he can do with his size.
No, and it's BYU has been a great story. I know Gus and Joel and that crew was blown away. They hadn't been out to BYU before. I had been there some years, and when it gets going out there, you want to talk about a fan base that just lights up like the 4th of July. and gets going. And I mean, it is a beautiful place. There's a few of them west of the Rockies. BYU is one of them. I mentioned Autzen Stadium, obviously Husky Stadium. I'm a little biased to when it is gets rocking and gets going, as Michigan could attest a couple weeks ago. But yeah, man, it is fun. And that little QB at BYU now, okay, that junior college transfer, he is a little baller. And they believe, and they play hard defensively. And then this Big 12 that again has cannibalized itself, other than Iowa State and BYU. They could be kind of a fun one to keep an eye on in Provo.
It is Unlocked with Fox's Brock Huard, brought to you by mybookie.ag. Again, double your initial deposit. All you got to do is put in that code next round at mybookie.ag. How good is the NFC North? We will get into that and a lot of the National Football League with our man Brock Huard on the other side, right here on Unlocked.
Follow Dunaway on Twitter and Instagram at jimdunaway.
Hey, Lance Taylor from the Next Round to tell you about one of our favorite places for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That is Hamburger Heaven since 1982. Hamburger Heaven has been serving Birmingham's best hamburgers, cheeseburgers, French fries, hand-spun milkshakes, and sandwiches made fresh to order. All of their ingredients are fresh and prepared daily. This includes their beef, always fresh, never frozen, hand-pattied each and every day. For breakfast, lunch, or dinner, visit any of the 4 locations, Highway 280, Irondale, Gardendale, and Homewood.
Hey, you feel that? That's fall in the air. And New Balance Birmingham got your fresh fall pair to kick it during game time and sport from the sideline. Come together at New Balance Birmingham on Highway 280 right next to Chick-fil-A. New Balance Birmingham, we got now.
Storm season is here. Make sure you have a plan of action in place right now. Greg from Pell City and Storm Restoration Roofing should be your first call when storms hit. Insurance companies love working with Storm Restoration Roofing because of Greg Nelson's name and reputation in the industry. When storms hit, call Greg Nelson. He's local, 205-542-3531. He's the home of the free no-cost roof inspection. Greg from Pell City on Facebook, 205-542-3531. It's Storm Restoration Roofing.
Happy football season. At the Next Round, we strive to make our loyal listeners feel like they're a part of the action all season long. My name is Emily Grace McWhorter, and I do that by bringing you along for any given Saturday in Auburn or Tuscaloosa. From pregame warm-ups, touchdowns that make you feel a part of the play, and everything in between, our goal is to make you feel like you're inside Bryant Denny or Jordan Hare. Follow along on our social media at Next Round Live on Instagram, X, and Facebook. Also, check out thebarnauburn.com and covercrimson.com while you're at it. Here's to fall Saturdays.
From the creators of The Next Round comes 2 new sites, covercrimson.com and thebarnauburn.com. 2 team sites with the same excitement and information-driven content that you get every day on The Next Round. Live daily shows, recorded shows, free of charge, plus premium content with insider information starting at just $1. And it's the perfect gift for the Alabama or Auburn fan in your family. Covercrimson.com or thebarnauburn.com. Sign up today.
Hey, there's nothing worse than waking up to a plumbing problem. Don't get caught in a flooded house. Call the guys at Hemp Hill Services. Adam, Chad, and the team at Hemp Hill are the only ones I trust to fix it and fix it right the first time. Hemp Hill Services does it right and always at a fair price. For all of your plumbing, cooling, and heating needs, trust the name that Birmingham has trusted since 1954. That is Hemp Hill Services. Call now, 205-229-2090. That's 205-229-2090.
Follow Next Round Live on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. The social media team at Next Round Live is dedicated to giving you daily news conferences and practice video from UAB, Alabama, Auburn, and around college football. Follow and compare to the sites you used to visit. You'll also get the latest highlights and news from the Next Round Daily Show. Turn on the notifications so you don't miss a thing. Next Round Live on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. See more at nextroundlive.com.
By now, you guys know how I feel about my fashion. However, did you know that I care about your fashion choices? Cargo shorts are out, flip-flops are only appropriate on the boat, and please throw away that stained t-shirt from college. You may be thinking, EG, that's all I own. What do I do? Here's what you do. Go to nextround.store and fill your cart with a wardrobe that is approved by me. Stock up on logo t-shirts, hoodies for football season, and hats for every day of the week. Trust me on this one and head over to nextround.store to get stocked up for this season.
Outside of the NFC North, 4 teams in the NFC have winning records. The entire 4 teams in the NFC North have winning records. Not one team in the NFC West has a winning record. When I look at the other teams in the NFC outside of the North that have winning records, Bucks, I probably need to start believing a little bit, but I don't. The Falcons, don't trust their defense. The Eagles, we'll get to them in a minute with Sirianni. Terrible look yesterday. And the Commanders, I like this team. I think they proved a lot, kind of playing toe-to-toe for the majority of the 60 minutes yesterday on the road against Baltimore. But that NFC North, Minnesota was off this week, undefeated, the only undefeated left. Detroit completely destroys and curb stomps the Dallas Cowboys. Green Bay, after Jordan Love struggled against the Rams in a win, looked like the Jordan Love that was paid in the offseason. And now the Bears, going over to London, and Caleb Williams, the way he looked yesterday, they got to be a team that kind of concerns you if you've got them on the schedule. How good is the NFC North right now? And do you believe all 4 of those teams are playoff teams?
Yeah, I mean, it is the best division in football, right? I think there may have been some debate, and there may still be over the course of the season, as the AFC North, I think, is also pretty good, but you don't have a Cleveland in there. To your point, you don't have a gimme, right? It's kind of back to our college football discussion. Like, man, we've always known this about the NFL. It is a week-to-week deal, and so much can swing in just a couple weeks. Oh, Caleb Williams can't play. Oh, be careful after 2 weeks, because I think the last 3, he's shown you why he was the number 1 pick in the draft. Oh, Sam Darnold is done. Well, be careful, right? Maybe there was a little QB rehab in San Francisco, and he's got a lot of people around him and pretty good offensive line. I think that's probably what I see, Lance, in that division. Detroit's the best O-line in the league. Minnesota's pretty good there. Green Bay is pretty good up front, right? And even Chicago is invested and spent some money and maybe not at the same level as Detroit, but they're not a sieve, which is what Arizona's O-line is, which is what Seattle's O-line is, which is what Dallas's O-line sure looks like with some of the losses that they have had, and many of those other teams. New York's very, very average. So yeah, I think that division may be a little bit like the AFC North. It's got pretty good play at the line of scrimmage, and a pretty big reason why they've been, just a little bit better than everybody else.
If I'm a Lions fan coming off yesterday, NFC Championship game, lead at halftime last year in San Francisco, coming off the 47-9 win, you would think you'd be elated, but Aiden Hutchinson had successful surgery last night. He had to repair fractured tibia.
Hold on a second. Hold on 1 second. Can you just pause real quick? When is there ever unsuccessful surgery? I know we're supposed to say that.
Yeah.
I know that's. Have you ever heard in your life, Lance, any press release where it's like,
no,
you know what?
But I'll tell you this:
unsuccessful surgery last
and you
night.
might not remember.
You don't know.
Alabama fans will remember this well, and you might not remember the name, but Tyrone Prothro was an incredible receiver.
Yes.
Alabama was
do.
undefeated.
Yep.
They were walking Urban Meyer in Florida off the field, and he's still in the game, and Alabama fans still won't get over that. And he breaks his leg, and it wasn't successful surgery. He was never the same after that. But you're right, and the presser is never going to say that. They are saying that Hutchinson could be back maybe towards the end of the regular season, postseason. But watching that break yesterday, it looked like something you'd see in MMA. When you have so much velocity, when 2 legs hit each other, I mean, it was just beyond painful to watch. And you lose a guy like Hutchinson, you're still a playoff team, but I don't know if you can win a championship. That team is ready to win a championship with Hutchinson healthy.
Yeah, and maybe, who knows, maybe they realize that too, and there is a trade deadline. And I know the NFL is not like Major League Baseball, where you're the Padres and you can add a whole bullpen or you can find a legitimate bat and make a move. But you have seen teams do that, and maybe they're in that situation. Lance would be hard-pressed to believe that he could possibly be back for any of this season. I hope he's back for the rest of his career, right? This is year 3. He's, 3-4 months away from getting probably the biggest deal in the history of any NFL defensive lineman. And now, that was brutal. I want to say, wasn't that similar to Alex Smith as well? Didn't Alex Smith have a very similar, absolutely gruesome broken tibia, tib fib, and then you remember his surgery where you go in and you get stabbed. I mean, that is a major deal.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, is he ever going to be the same with his explosion on the edge? Because right now, I think you could say he's the best defensive lineman. Chris Jones is in there, Myles Garrett. And that's another thing. Would you, if you're Detroit.
TJ Watt.
And Brad, obviously TJ Watt. If you're Brad Campbell, Brad Holmes, excuse me, the general manager for Detroit, do you take a look at Cleveland with Myles Garrett? Do you look at Max Crosby, who actually shoved his coach yesterday? Those are guys that seem like they'd be great fits, and they're just going to waste right now in Cleveland and in Vegas.
Yeah, here's the thing that I have learned there in Detroit. And I remember talking to Chris Spielman about this, right, who left the broadcasting world and is the president there and is also right along with Holmes and Campbell. They've all been in lockstep. And what you cannot do is ever waver. Now, Crosby plays with his hair on fire. So sure, you could say that. I don't know cap space, and they paid extended Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown, and you're going to want to keep a whole bunch in the kitty. So I don't know what their cap space situation is. But you got to be careful about bringing people from the outside. I guess that's kind of the theme of this Monday, frankly. It's kind of circled all the way back to our initial conversation with Bama and where we're all. Like, I think it is very easy in a fantasy football world, in a microwave world that we live in, like just bring in that acquisition, just bring that person in. But the good organizations and the good college programs, they recruit the right kind of kids. They know exactly the kind of human being to fit into their place. And Detroit, from Holmes to Spielman to Campbell, they have been unapologetic about the kind of person they're going to bring in, because they know, man, you bring in one bad apple, it can spoil the whole deal of everything that they have got going. So I don't know. It is certainly something to consider over the weeks ahead and into that trade deadline. And we have seen teams do it that are in this position. Your beloved Rams did it, right? And said that we've got to go for it. We've got to bring this guy in. We've got to make this acquisition. We've got to have because we have enough pieces there. And there is no way that you can watch the throttling of the Lions over the Seahawks and the throttling of the Lions over the Cowboys and not realize, like, whoa, they have got so many pieces there. And maybe they would look into that situation. But man, God bless Aiden Hutchinson, that surgeon, that surgery, keep the staph infection out, keep the crap out, get that healing and that process going, because that is a major surgery.
It is Unlike with Fox's Brock Huard, brought to you by our friends at MyBookie, mybookie.ag. They will double that initial deposit when you put in that code next round. Football season in full effect, so is winning season at mybookie.ag. This is probably a ridiculous question. I'm going to ask it anyway. Is it possible the Commanders look better in a loss than the Eagles looked in a win over Cleveland?
Yeah, it is kind of ridiculous because we know the NFL is only about one thing, and we do know it is hard to get those. But man, what are you doing, Sirianni? You just cannot do that, right?
Hey, and then you tell me this too before you get to your rant. Then he brings his kid into the presser where he knows he's going to be asked really tough questions with that Philadelphia media. And to me, that was almost like a security blanket, like such a bad look to actually talk shit to your crowd who's paying hard money to see what has become an average product. And then you take your kid up there to the presser.
Yeah, you can't do it. You can't do it. And I've watched your stuff and listened to you guys down there with my buddy Trent Dilfer, and he and I go back forever. And I know Trent, and I know the way he's wired, and I know some of the challenges he's facing in your Birmingham market right now. And I'm just like, you can't say that, right? You just can't. You can't do that.
Got to know your audience, man.
That's right. And for Sirianni, like, man, you know what it reminds me of, Lance? And I apologize, is we've done this now for some years. And if I'm getting redundant on stories, just say,
never.
Hey, Jackal, you already told us that one.
Nothing like a Brock story. I get text all the time.
Okay, well, I'm sitting in the QB meeting room, and it's Jim Caldwell was our QB coach in Indianapolis. This would have been 2002 or 2003, and Tom Moore, who just wrote a book. Tom is the coordinator that never looked at me, never talked to me, never whatever. Like, I was just not even there. I was the ghost. Jim would say hi and very kind man. And Tom was very grumpy and could care less about me. And that's okay. It was Peyton's world.
Yeah, you have an excuse. You had Peyton Manning in the room.
know the audience, Brock. Like, hey man, it's not warm and fuzzy. You're a West Coast guy. I had, for 3 years in Seattle, it was Dilfer and Hasselback and me. It was Kitten and me. It was great relationship. Like, gonna be a different world, right? It's gonna be a little different animal, especially with Tom. But there were times, and Tom would say the most astute things that still stick with me, Lance. Play smart, not scared. Play smart, not scared. Just four simple words that just like, man, I still say these things on my broadcast. Well, I remember sitting there, and I forget the exact coach or player, but he's, looking at the newspaper clippings, and he's like, the game got him. The game got him. And like, huh? Like the game got him. Like the game will get you. And if you allow it, the game will get you. You've got to fight against the game. And the game in this case was the press and the media. And he would say, like, man, if Terry Bradshaw had to endure today's media, like he had a problem with one bad article. Well, now you got 100 media credentialed people. Like it just is, right? It's overboard. And in this case, I could just picture Tom saying, yep, the game's got him. Like the game of the Philly media, the game of the Philly fans, not even the game on the field. But you do something like that, it is a very clear sign that they got you. And now all you have done is created so much more fodder. Don't do it. And then, well, I got caught up. No, you can't do that. You're the head coach.
Yeah, and you know what's coming. Like, if you don't go out and dominate Cleveland, you're going to hear boos. So I don't want to say it's premeditated, but you know what's coming. I didn't get that at all. Did they ever get to you? Did the game ever get to you?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
But we grew up at a time with no social media. I mean, we're dating ourselves here, but I can't even imagine being a 20-year-old quarterback after turning it over 3 times. And you got to stay away from social media, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was hard for me, Lance. I was in a little bit of a fishbowl, right? I was like the third in line from Billy Joe Hobart to my older brother Damon that started the 3 previous years. They win the national title in 91. Expectations are high. And, the program unfortunately couldn't sustain it. We go on probation a couple years. And yeah, man, my last year of school where I came back, I was almost in the draft class with Leaf and Manning. And really, thought about it, met with agents legally, and did my due diligence, and very likely would have been the third QB somewhere, I don't know, late first in the third round. I think Greasy was the next one taken in the third round that year, Brian. So I would have, and I really thought about it. But I went back to school. I wanted to try to be the number 1 pick. That was the year with Couch and Keely Smith and Don McNabb and Cole Pepper, and it would have been probably a lot more sensible to come out the year before. On a little bit more of a high than certainly I did the following year, where I got beat up in every way. I got beat up physically. I got beat up emotionally. I got beat up mentally. I heard it. When my mom can't sit in the stands, Lance, because I'm getting booed, and her and Aunt Bonnie got to go drink boxed wine in the minivan because she didn't want to hear all the stuff being said about her son. Like, she can't do it. Yeah. Does that weigh on you as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old? Absolutely it does. Do you hear that? Oh, I don't hear yes, you hear the boos. Yes, you hear that. Yes, you wear it when your parents or your wife or my then fiance, Molly, nearly punches a frat boy in the face because he's, mother bleeping me in the stands, and she turns around like, yeah, man, you do. Whether it is that stuff then or it's all the social media realms now, but the best of them just have that thick skin, that tunnel vision, that focus that I truly can't waste my energy there, right? This game is so hard. The line and the margin is so thin that if I am this and I'm starting to like have my focus in my eyes and I broaden that out to all that noise, you will have no chance.
This is back-to-back weeks you've gone 8 Mile on your poor upbringing with the old minivan with the box wine.
Yes.
Does mom still drink box wine, or is it passing time is sent to her all the time now?
Yeah, she's a little higher quality now, higher quality, but it was the Franzia box wine, the day after headache back in the day for sure. I do want to thank one of your great listeners who tweeted me. I apologize, I didn't write the name down, and let me know that the pork shoulder and the pork butt are rather interchangeable. they were like one of my old teammates whose butt went so high it touched his shoulder blades, his scapula. He will remain unnamed. He was a defense tackle. So yes, thank you for the audience members out there, because we did talk about 8 Mile, gallons of milk, and pork shoulder and butt last week. It was great.
I continue to forget that you've got a relationship with Trent Dilfer based on you guys were teammates back in the day. Yeah. And I brought this up. We did a Saturday pregame show, and we were talking about UAB struggles, and obviously they didn't realize they were about to get demolished again by Army. But I told the guys that maybe the most unlikely ejection in the history of the NFL was Trent Dilfer getting thrown out of a game. And I think you were still at Washington when this happened, because I think it was 95, I think, maybe 96. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember this, but John Randall was just killing him in the old creamsicle and just on his ass nonstop. And he went low one play, and Dilfer jumped on him and went after him and went for his throat. Probably not a good move, but he was bounced after that.
Trent is a emotional guy. We go back a long, long, long ways. We've lived, it did through a bunch of those years, a lot of life, the well-documented loss of his son was something that just brought us, so not just him and me, but our QB room, our teams, our families, just so many people, our pro athletes outreach, Christian community together in such an amazing way. So there are some really strong bonds. When I was doing the UFL 2 years ago, when I was down there seeing you guys, I also went to a UAB spring practice as that was going on too. And I watched Trent get really upset at official, it's called just bring officials out. And I watched him get really passionate and really emotional, and he wears it and he lives it all on his sleeve. Like, it's just there. I mean, that's just Trent. And
that was one of my points. I was telling these guys, like, if it continues to get bad, he is an emotional guy. Like, there's going to be a meltdown sooner or later.
Yeah, and that's where, hopefully his staff and hopefully the athletic director and the people, like, he's 2 years into this too, man. This is like, and he will be a humble guy. He will admit, and he knows, I think some of those challenges that he does face just in his emotion and in his passion and in his competitiveness. And he wants to be great. And it's hard times right now. It is certainly some tough times on that program. I know you guys have talked about that too, where UAB has been in the past, but this is not the past, man. This is the new age of college football. And there are some elements there that, if you are in a rebuild, can be hard, can be really difficult, and that much more difficult. And then, keeping control of your emotions is going to be a pretty important one for him moving forward.
Maybe the best 2-4 team in the NFL right now, the Cincinnati Bengals, after 4 really difficult losses. They find a way to win again against New York, kind of controlled the game. Bad loss for me at lanceslock.com. I had to do a public apology earlier, Brock. It was my worst weekend.
How was the weekend?
It was awful.
Was it?
Like, awful.
Doggone it, Lance.
Probably the worst I've had in 11 years of doing this.
Lance, be better.
I know.
Be better, Lance.
I will tell you.
Don't come on here for an hour for you to have a weekend like that.
It completely ruined my weekend. I absolutely was miserable Saturday. I got up and I was like, the only thing that can work today is a 5-0 Sunday. And game one, we went down with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and it didn't get any better throughout the day. And then you get Chase Brown taking it to the house when New York has one timeout with under a minute and a half to go. All he had to do was fall down. At least I would have closed the night with a winner. Anyway, with all that said, the first score in that game was Joe Burrow, 47 yards, taking it to the house. There was not a defender, in sight, but he almost topped out at 20 miles per hour. He's got better wheels than people think. Remember watching him at LSU use those wheels a little bit? What was your longest touchdown run as a quarterback? From Pee Wee, high school, there wasn't one.
No, maybe 30, maybe 25, 30 on a screen in high school where all the screen got tackled and everybody was there and I went the other way. I think maybe 10 or 12 yarder in college, just not, no, that was not my game. My game was find the outlet and get it out. To be honest, actually, we did run option back in the day. My dad was a big believer in speed option and dive option. So we had some of those elements. And I think my first touchdown run, Lance, you could check me on this, was my first game, my redshirt freshman year at Arizona State. And it was about somewhere between 8 and 12, and it was speed option. And so I could do a little bit of that back in the day, but no. Nope, not topping 20 miles an hour. That just was not in my genetic code, unfortunately.
Always.
Let me ask you,
Yep.
how are you going to do it this week? How are we going to put last week behind us? How are you not going to listen to the noise? How are you not going to be affected by social media? How are you going to get up off of your keister, pick yourself up for the people, and have a better weekend?
It is one game at a time, Brock. I am taking full accountability. There's nobody else on my team, so I am taking full accountability. There is no, I've been coaching this program for 11 years now, and this was step backwards. And I'm not tearing the whole thing down and rebuilding because I've got my algorithms and I've got my way of doing things, but we're going to be better. I will promise you that.
Good.
You're always great. We appreciate it. Always brought to you by mybookie.ag. Double that initial deposit with Next Round. Very important code word there. He is Fox's Brock Huard. Have fun in Tucson.
I will. Don't bet Arizona, Colorado. There's no chance to know what that one's going to look like.
Okay.
Don't do that. Have a great week. This is so much fun every week, Lance. Thanks, man. And we'll talk to you next Monday.
Great stuff right here on Unlocked with Fox's Brock Huard.